If you're not familiar with the term boondoggle, consider the fact our federal government recently underwrote the total cost of a study dealing with Polish bisexual frogs. If that doesn't give you a hint, stand by. I'll be right back. A while back, the federal government handed out a grant to some researchers to produce a study called The Demography of Happiness. They surveyed quite a few people to find out why some lead happier lives than others. They found as a rule that younger people were happier than older people, people with money were happier than those without it, and healthy people were happier than those who were sick. The cost for all of this was $249,000. $249,000 to find out that it's better to be young, rich, and healthy than old, sick, and poor. I mention this case to remind you that although the economy is sluggish, the federal boondoggle business is booming. A few years ago, a magazine receiving funds from the National Foundation on the Arts published a one-word poem for which it paid the author $500. The word was light, spelled with 2 extra consonants. Now that would be hilarious if it weren't for the fact that some Americans go to bed hungry or without jobs while the federal arbiters of taste hand out frivolous gifts from the public purse. The Food and Drug Administration paid a Buffalo, New York company to conduct a study of why children fall off tricycles. The research engineers drew a profound conclusion. They fall off tricycles because they lose their balance or collide with an object. They also learned that children get longer legs as they get older, thus complicating the business of riding tricycles. Now, the purpose behind this survey was to help the FDA determine if it should issue safety design standards for tricycles. I'm not at all sure the government has any business considering such things unless someone has proved that a lot of kids are injured riding tricycles, thus constituting a national problem, and no word of such a problem preceded the study. The Smithsonian Institution, which is federally funded, of course, isn't averse to putting in for some exotic boondoggles, too. Not long ago, it sent Congress a shopping list of research projects it wanted to sponsor, including reproductive rhythms of catfish in India, or how fishing boat crews cause conflicts in Yugoslavian peasant towns, and a study of Polish bisexual frogs. Now, some of these studies may serve a larger, more serious purpose, but one can only wonder why private sources and colleges and universities aren't taking these projects on for themselves. The frog study, for example, was intended to test some new methods for distinguishing between one species of animal and another. Now, that may be a legitimate scientific research objective, but is that what we have a federal government for? In recent years, a new cottage industry has sprung up to take advantage of federal boondoggles in the name of science and culture. A small army of bright wordsmiths and scholars will, for a fee, help prospective grantees dream up serious-sounding titles for their projects in order to impress Congress or a federal agency. Grant proposals are chock full of persuasive salesmanship, stressing the vital nature of the grantee's project. That Congress takes such stuff seriously at all is a measure of how far we've strayed in recent years from the original purposes of federal government. There are a few congressmen who battle the boondoggles, who say, in effect, hey, wait a minute, what business does government have paying for this? What's the benefit to the taxpayers? What we need is a research program that'll tell us how we can get a few hundred more congressmen just like those others. This is Ronald Reagan. Thanks for listening. A bill going through Congress may put an end to some of the silly projects your money's being wasted on. I'll be right back. The federal government recently spent $500,000 to find out that when people are angry, stop smoking, or hear loud noises, they clench their jaws. Yes, it was one of those studies approved by the National Science Foundation. The researcher, Roland Hutchison of Kalamazoo State Hospital in Michigan, spent 7 years working his way through the study of wasps, boa constrictors, rats, and monkeys before he got to human beings. Among his findings was that monkeys, quote, became angry when they were shocked and would try to get away from the shock, unquote. He also learned at taxpayer expense that drunk monkeys do not usually react as quickly or as often as sober monkeys, and that hungry monkeys get angry more quickly than well-fed monkeys. When he got to people, Mr. Hutchison discovered, quote, that people get angry when they feel cheated and tend to clench their jaws or even scream and kick, unquote. I couldn't be happier to hear that. For a while there, I was beginning to think I might be a monkey. Are you sick of hearing stories of your money being spent on projects of this stripe? Well, so was Congressman Robert Bauman, a young second-termer from Maryland. When the National Science Foundation's annual budget was up for approval recently, Bob Bauman proposed an amendment requiring the foundation to provide the Congress with a 30-day notice of proposed grants during which period either the Senate or the House would have the chance to pass a resolution vetoing any grant. Any grants not disapproved by either chamber would become effective after the 30 days. In support of his amendment, Congressman Baumann cited complaints his office had received concerning such grants as, quote, $6,000 to study Polish bisexual frogs, $70,000 to study the smell of perspiration given off by Australian Aborigines, and $2.6 million to study the sex life of crabs, unquote. Miracles will happen even in the 94th Congress. Bob Baumann's amendment passed the House by 212 to 199. The National Science Foundation was somewhat stunned by this development. It wasn't so much that they thought many of their grants would be vetoed should the amendment become law. It's just that the mere threat of a veto would have prevented many of the more absurd projects from ever being approved in the first place. So they beat a path to their friends on the Senate side, hoping to stop the Baumann amendment there. Fortunately for them, the chairman of the relevant subcommittee is a friend of theirs, Senator Edward Kennedy. He called the Baumann amendment an attempt, quote, by members of Congress to act as censors, unquote. Then the senator attempted to prevent Congressman Baumann from appearing before the subcommittee, which of course wasn't censorship. Other committee members intervened in Baumann's behalf. Still, the amendment faces rough going in the Senate. If you're tired of seeing your tax dollar used to invade the privacy of bisexual frogs and amorous crabs, you might write your senators urging passage of the Baumann Amendment to the National Science Foundation appropriation. This is Ronald Reagan. Thanks for listening.